There we go. So whenever you're ready then, Ali, we can get started and I'll let people in as and when they join.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Sam. Really appreciate it. Hello, guys. How are you today? I mean that really genuinely. I think over the last few years of interacting a lot with people who've got kids with special needs, additional needs, or simply just higher emotional needs, I really notice it when people say to me, "No, really, how are you?" So I really mean that tonight from me to you, for whatever reason you're on this call, how are you? I think it's really, really important to be conscious of how you're feeling and what kind of state of mind and being that you're in when you're managing kids with these higher needs. So firstly, I just wanted to say that, hello. As Tam said, my name is Ali, and I set up a community called FizzyKids a couple of years ago now. It started with a kind of a small informal group in the village that I live in, and it just kind of snowballed from there, really. It started me realizing how many people have kids who've got some kind of either additional need or simply just taking a little bit longer than other kids to learn to regulate their emotions and big behaviours that might go with that. So I'm going to kind of cover all fizzy kids tonight, if you like, for whatever reason they might just need extra support or need more of your time or more input than maybe some other kids. So I'm going to kind of cover the whole lot tonight. And when I was thinking about what I was going to talk about, I thought I kind of going to call this session how I stopped telling my kids to calm down and why it wasn't working anyway. Okay, and I think that second bit's really important because there are lots of really good reasons why our kids who are a little bit more fizzy, higher needs than others, saying to them calm down just doesn't seem to work. Okay, so that's kind of where I wanted to start. So very briefly, who am I? That's the boring bit, so I won't spend too long on it, but I have two kids, both who have additional needs. I have an elder son who is diagnosed autistic. He also has dyspraxia and sensory processing disorder. And my younger son has neurodevelopmental trauma, so he suffered a lot of kind of trauma as a child, as a young infant, really, and as a result of that, they both have quite high emotional needs. And I think, if I'm honest, the first kind of 3 or 4 years didn't really notice much difference. They might have been a bit harder work than some other kids, but when they're little, you can kind of just tell them what to do or put them to bed a bit early, and you don't really notice anything different. And it's only once these kids start getting into like the school system or start having to interact with their peers more that some of those differences become more obvious. And that was really the same with my parenting. And I just got to a point quite early on, really, where I realized that I was parenting the way I had been parented, and I was very fortunate. I had two amazing parents who unfortunately are now divorced, but they were there for me and they supported me. And because I'm neurotypical and they're neurotypical, it kind of worked. Of course, it didn't work every day. We had arguments, there were stresses. That is just a normal part of family life. But I was trying to parent my kids in that way, and it wasn't working. Whatever I did, it just wasn't working. So if I did the naughty step, I mean, honestly, I can't even explain to you what would happen when I tried to do the naughty step, or the go to your room thing, or the taking toys away thing, or just anything like that just was having no effect at all. So I've been on a real journey relearning to parent, if you like, simply relearning to parent because my kids are different to me. Okay. So that's really kind of where I came from. So I always say I am just a mum, or I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a therapist, but I have had a lot of interactions with people like that, and I've had a lot of interactions with parents who are really struggling. So that's where kind of all of my knowledge comes from. All right, so let's maybe just get on to FizzyKids, all right? I guess FizzyKids, the way I would describe them is that when the little things become big things, then you know that the big things have become completely overwhelming. Okay, so to summarize, a fizzy kid deals with higher levels of stress than other kids. You could pretty much boil it down to that point. Okay, so you may have a more stressed out kid than others. And I want you to just maybe just spend a few moments thinking about what that might mean for your kid, because stress is not just reserved for adults. Okay, it's not just reserved for adults who have a hard job or they're going through financial difficulties or relationship difficulties. Stress can be felt by children too. So fizzy kids will be more stressed than other kids. And as a result of that, they're probably either in or close to survival mode. All right, and I talk a lot about survival mode with the people I work with. And I encourage that because I would like you to maybe, if nothing else, go away from this session. And when you see big behaviors from your kids, think, okay, they're maybe in survival mode right now. You know, they are really struggling, so that we start to see a struggle rather than bad behavior. Okay, and that's a really, really kind of big shift in how we interact with our children. So when I say big behaviors, I'm talking about stuff that you may or may not see, like shouting, screaming. Maybe they're just persistently rude to you or other people. They might hit you, kick, punch. They could spit or hiss. They might break things, or they could be quite the opposite. They could be silent. They could be so highly stressed and anxious that they're hiding away, that they're under the table or in the wardrobe the whole time. They might be being excessively oppositional or controlling. So all of these behaviors, if it starts to become unmanageable, they are big behaviors, they are challenging behaviors, and they probably come from a place of stress. Okay, so I just really want to emphasize that point. And I'm just going to share a slide with you now and just talk you through it. I'm not going to do many slides, but I just wanted to, oh, there we go. Okay. All right, so let's just talk about some of those reasons in a bit more detail about stress and about fizzy behaviors. So there's kind of three core reasons why your child might be more overwhelmed or stressed or fizzy than others. So the first is exactly what we said, that stress bit and that survival mode. And there's a little bit in your brain called the amygdala. And the only reason I talk about that is that it's really important later on when we start talking about trauma, because that is the bit of your brain that reacts to threat. And I'm going to encourage you, if you've got a child who's either neurodiverse or who is showing fizzy behaviors or higher emotional needs, I'd like you to become a little bit of a neuroscientist, right? Become a bit of a geek. And you don't need to get into the detail, but the really helpful thing I found, particularly when trying to tell other members of my family and friends about my kids and what's going on, is that there is now scientific research to prove some of this stuff. All right, the neuroscientists have done some brilliant work, and it's helping us to explain why our children are different. And so you've got that little bit in your brain. And the thing is about fizzy kids, sometimes it works too well. All right, so they might be brilliant at fighting. All right, and let's think about that as actually a really useful survival tool, just in the right times and in the right ways. They might be really good at that flight mode, running off. Okay, running is a pretty effective way to survive. All right, but if they are in that survival mode for too long, or if they're going into survival mode too quickly, then there's probably something else going on. And that might be happening at school, that might be happening in the home. So the second reason why you might be seeing these fizzy behaviors are because then it might be that they have an additional or special need. And we're going to talk a little bit on the next kind of slide or so about when to seek help. So I won't go into too much detail around that now, but it might be worth remembering that some of those big behaviours that you're seeing are actually coping mechanisms because of what they're dealing with, because of those diagnoses. Okay, so for example, my eldest son is pretty good at hitting and punching. And that is not ideal. And we're working hard on kind of easing that out as he gets older. But because he is autistic, his reactions are super fast, super swift. And we always talk about it as a bit of superpower, actually. If he had that woolly mammoth in front of him, God, that woolly mammoth does not stand a chance, let me tell you that. Okay, so it's really important to kind of see some of those behaviours as a direct link to what's going on and how your children's brains are functioning. And the third reason why your child may be more stressed or showing those big behaviours is because of adverse childhood experiences. And what I mean by that is really difficult incidents that have happened early on in their life, usually under the age of 5. Okay, so that might be trauma if they are adopted or fostered. It could be actually because birth mother had very high levels of stress or cortisol levels during pregnancy. Even that can lead to some form of neurodevelopmental impact. It might be because your child used to have really high temperatures when they were young. Even that can have an impact on them. It could be due to life changes, a move, a house move, a relationship change. Okay, so it's really important to remember that those childhood experiences can affect children for life. And that can seem a bit of a kind of a negative thing to say, but it's not to say that they can't learn to deal with them, because children are incredibly resilient, okay, when supported in the right way. So just going back to what I was talking about, when should I seek help? And I get asked this a lot, and there is no right or wrong answer, but this is usually what I say. If you're seeing these kind of big behaviours regularly, and by that I mean weekly, if it's starting to become weekly, when you're seeing these really big behaviours, and it might be at home, it might be at school, and it might be to do with their work or emotional regulation or sensory needs or eating, whatever it's affecting, that's when you should think about asking for help, okay? And just listen to your gut instinct. You are the expert in your child, all right? So it's easy to get fobbed off sometimes by people, GPs or whatever, or teachers who maybe don't see it. If they see a child in school who's doing really well, and you're telling them that at home they're a completely different person, and their meltdowns and then they're probably holding it all in at school, and it's all coming out at home. But that is not a normal situation, okay? So it's really important to listen to your gut instinct. If it doesn't feel like just a phase, it's probably not. And it might be that your life started to feel unmanageable. And if that is the case, you should seek more help. And if you're looking for help, there are lots of different routes you can go down. So at your child's school, it would be worth talking to potentially the SENCO, who's the Special Educational Needs Coordinator. Schools also have links to educational psychologists who can come in and assess your child and to see kind of how they're getting on in the school environment. A lot of schools now have something called an ELSA. ELSA is an emotional literacy support assistant. Okay, so it's people who kind of have got really good skills in helping your child to emotionally regulate. The school nurse can have great information too, and obviously also the head teacher. And I would say it's worth going to one of those specialist people in your child's school. Don't just stop at their teacher, because their teacher might be a brilliant teacher, but they don't necessarily have the knowledge or expertise in other areas. And if you've got issues at home, don't be afraid to tell school. Yeah, it's easy to think as like two different parts of your life are not linked. They absolutely are. And schools should be aware if your child is really struggling at home. And if there are kind of big struggles at home, think about going to your GP. There are obviously pediatrics. CAMS is Child and Adult Mental Health Service. You've probably heard a lot about that on the news. Massively oversubscribed, very long waiting lists, but they are still there. And in some areas, they can still provide fairly swift support to families if needed. You may have a social worker, use them. You know, so often social workers are seen as the baddies. They absolutely might be in some cases, I don't know, but my experience is generally that if you direct social workers down a path to support you and maybe kind of tell them exactly what you need from them, they can be really powerful allies as well. And you may have a social worker for many different reasons. It's not a negative thing all the time. So, you know, if you have, don't think about it as a negative thing. Try and kind of, in the nicest possible way, use them, get them to support you. And if you have got adopted or foster kids, then there is the Adoption Support Fund, which can provide funds to help support adopted children. And people say to me, okay, fine, there's all that help, but where do I start? I would always say, start with your school team. They've got really, really good knowledge, generally speaking. And the other starting point, I always say, if you can find some funds, you might have to beg, borrow and steal off anyone, grandparents, bank of mum and dad, your own bank account if you're lucky enough, then getting some professionals on board can be really helpful and quite empowering as well, because it can tell you things that you don't necessarily know yourself. We found an occupational therapist who focused on sensory needs was an amazing starting point for us as a family. Okay, so sometimes help can come from different places. All right, so I'm just going to stop talking for a minute, and I'd just really like you to think for a few moments, which big behaviours, which fizzy behaviours is your kid presenting most often? And based on what we've just talked about, what do you think are the likely reasons for that? Okay, and I know you're not an expert in terms of maybe letters after your name around this, but you are the expert in your child. So just spend a few moments thinking about that. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, Junaid here.
Hi, Junaid.
So I just wanted to talk about my child. So sometimes, I mean, the big issue I face with my kid, I mean, he's just 4 or 4.5 almost. So what I face with him is that he doesn't eat, at home, So feeding him dinner, is the most, difficult, task. He'll be eating, most days, like, 9 out of 10, times at nursery, he'll be eating perfectly fine. But when he is at home, he won't be, eating very well. Even, on the weekends, okay, maybe, breakfast and lunch to some extent, he'll be doing very well. But yeah, so that's the first thing. Secondly, what I also face with him is that sometimes he's, his behavior is very, very, very good, but then, sometimes he'll be like, showing behaviors like, not listening, or, being a bit like, more like, cranky, or like, saying that, I mean, resisting, on almost everything, So I'm not too sure, at times that, what could be the reasons. Maybe I think he's still, going through a trauma, probably, because of the potential, separation with, my ex-partner in still, early days. But yeah, and I think the reason which I could think of is that, I think we haven't, got quite into a routine for, having a regular contact with mom, probably. I don't know. So that could be the reason. But I've spoken to his nursery, but they say, no, it's nothing to do with that, because he had some behavioral issues at nursery. So they said, just keep reminding him, which I'm doing, and they are doing at, nursery as well. I've bought some books as well. But I think there's, something more going on, inside, his head. I think he's, clearly upset because of, this trauma. That's what I think. So I don't know. I mean, what would be, maybe Senko would be a good thing. I don't know, because he's starting, school in September as well. So maybe, I don't know, talk to, his like, new teacher in school, probably. I don't know. So, and any advice, would be greatly appreciated.
Oh, firstly, Junaid, thank you for being so open and for sharing that, because it's quite hard, but just, know that there are others out there, and you're not alone, would be the first thing I would say. And secondly, well done for doing everything that you do with your child on a day-to-day basis, okay? Because the fact of the matter is, he's here, he's alive, he's okay. He might not be functioning completely, but so just don't forget that, please. So let's just maybe go through those two specific points. Now, I'm no eating disorder or anything specialist, and I wouldn't necessarily suggest that this is an eating disorder. I think you're probably spot on that it's it will be related to anxiety or stress of some kind that he's dealing with around the trauma that he's obviously kind of going through, as you say, because of the separation. Just out of curiosity, Junaid, what have you done anything kind of with him to try and encourage him? I'm sure you have, but was there anything that you've done that might have worked or not worked?
Like, I mean, encourage in which respect, with regards to like eating or behavior?
Yeah,
or
eating. So if we just focus on the eating for a moment.
So eating, I mean, I did attend a fussy eaters course a few months ago. So got some tips from there. So tried them, worked a little bit, but not all the time. So I've just started another technique that I put the timer on and say, if you finish within this time, and you will get like a treat or something, and things like that. So again, it's hit and miss. Sometimes it works very well, but sometimes it doesn't. And obviously he starts to like trick me. As in like yeah. So I mean, I haven't found a perfect formula for this. Maybe I don't know, it's a normal thing as well. Not too sure really. So
my thought around that, Junaid, is that being a picky eater and not eating because you're stressed are probably two different things. So there might be an element of him being a bit fussy or picky about things, but I'm thinking that he's eating at nursery, okay, and because of that, he's probably just joining in. He's got loads of distractions. He's got his peer group around him, so he maybe doesn't want to look different or seem different. So he's kind of joining in. Whereas at home, it's just you and him. And if you think about the change that he's been through, it's possible. I don't know how he used to have meals before, but maybe he used to have his meal with you and mum or a sibling. And that's different. Whereas at nursery, it's probably the same. It's just carried on. That's been the same. So I'm wondering if he's, and maybe you're in a different house or a property now than you used to be.
It's the same house.
Oh, it's the same house. Okay,
yeah.
Well, that's good. That's good. But I'm just wondering, it might be worth thinking about what's changed for him eating at home.
I think what I have tried is that I've like some on the weekend I asked some of his friends to come over as well, and then eat together.
Yeah.
So even then he won't eat that much either, and even at nursery, yeah, most of the time he would eat, but there will be odd days he won't eat, so fussy eating, I mean, so, even if at nursery they offer alternatives, or I offer alternatives, I mean, yeah, I mean, he won't eat. But I think it's not just about eating as well, because I do know that he is hungry, because at night he would ask for a lot of milk as well, like when he won't eat properly, his dinner. But then there are other, like issues as well, because he won't listen most of the time, or when I take him for football on weekends, his class, then he would be like uh, not join in, some of the times, like he would just keep coming back to me, and things like that, or just stand in there, and then not play or anything, so all these things seem to me that that's not quite normal either, or even if you go to a birthday party, even there he won't be like joining in to eat with other kids or something, so these are the kind of things really,
Yeah. Listen, I just wonder, because I'm conscious of time, and just kind of getting through the rest of the kind of stuff we were going to talk about tonight, but I would be more than happy for you to contact me afterwards, because I've got some other thoughts that may or may not help. It sounds like you've tried a lot, so well
Yeah.
done for trying some different
No.
things. But if you drop me a note at the end of the session, I'll quite happily come back with some thoughts. Would that be okay?
No, that's fine. Sorry for taking too much time. I mean,
Don't
just
worry. No,
yeah,
it's
thank
lovely. That's what
thanks
you're
for the,
here for. But I think it sounds like there's quite a lot going on, and I do, I do feel like it is stress related and anxiety related, rather than him being fussy or picky, particularly around the food thing. And I possibly wonder around the defiance and opposition. That is a classic sign of anxiety, actually.
yeah,
And he's obviously dealing with a lot of anxiety around the separation.
or a very good behavior as well. So I read somewhere, I mean, if kids are very good,
Yeah,
I think that's a reaction as well, I think
it
so.
is. It is. It's so we talked about survival mode. Actually, being really well behaved is almost like freeze mode. It's almost like you're
Mhm.
kind of stuck in freeze mode, and you're actually too worried to kind of let go. So absolutely, that can be a sign of anxiety too. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're spot on.
Okay. No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. No,
But yeah,
thanks.
so please do contact me at the end, Junaid.
Yeah, no, will do. Thanks.
Okay, so we've got 45 minutes tonight, so I can't cover everything, but I mean, there is so much you can do. But the reason I asked you to think about the three biggest behaviors that you're seeing is simply because you can only deal with so much at once, particularly as a single parent. Like you've really got to prioritize on the biggest issues. Okay, so focus on one behavior if you want at a time. It really is worth it, and it's almost like everything else can go out of the room for a bit. Yeah, don't worry about them eating perfectly with a knife and fork and saying please and thank you after everything. If you're dealing with a child who's really struggling to eat, or a child who is highly anxious, that's where you need to focus your efforts. All right, so what I'm going to talk about next is just a really practical idea that might help make things better for your fizzy kids. And I talked a bit at the beginning about relearning to parent, and how I had to kind of relearn to communicate and interact with my kids. And this is kind of my raison d'etre in life now, is to kind of help parents learn to talk to their children differently, and in doing so help them regulate more. So I'm going to start with a bit of an exercise, and I just want you to think about something called your core scripts. Okay, now we all have core scripts. They are basically phrases or things we say to our kids that make you think, oh my goodness, I sound just like my mum or my dad or my uncle, whoever it was who maybe brought you up. So so some of those in my vocabulary, my core script vocabulary, are things like this: sit up straight at the table, look me in the eye when I'm talking to you. Oh, calm down. You're 8. You should be able to do that by now. How dare you talk to me like that? Do as I say, not as I do. If you talk back to me again, you're in deep trouble. Okay, so those were mine, being honest. Okay, and I was really, really good at those phrases about 5 years ago, and then they didn't work at all. So what I want you to do is just think about which core scripts are familiar to you. Which do you use, and do they work? Just again, a minute or so to think about that.
I think quite a few of these sound familiar.
In which case, Junaid, you're in good company.
Yep, I agree. I've definitely said some of those myself, or very similar to that effect. And you as you were reading through, you kind of think, yep.
Okay. So it's really important to say that there is nothing necessarily wrong with those phrases. Okay, I don't want you to beat yourself up about it, but all I want you to do is notice. All right, because it's in noticing things that you can start to change things. So, oh, what's happened? Something's happened. Sorry. So, it's becoming aware. Okay, it's starting to relearn to parent simply, if nothing else, by becoming aware of your kids' needs and the impact that what and how you're saying things to them is having on them. And, you know, again, Junaid, thank you so much for being honest. But I think that is a really classic case of a child who is probably neurotypical, you know, fairly kind of standard child who is just dealing with a really difficult situation and having to come through the other side. And it might be that those really traditional parenting techniques and phrases, they might be absolutely fine to use in a year or so's time. But right now, in this moment, when your child is showing stress, anxiety, survival mode, they're not having the impact that you want. And I mean, you know, in our house, when I got to a point of telling my kids to calm down, I was like, it was having the opposite effect. It was absolutely opposite. They weren't calming down at all. They were getting more wound up. So, so those core scripts can make you more stressed. You, as an adult, make you more stressed. It can make your child more stressed. And it can leave you both in that survival mode. Not only your child in the survival mode, but you as the adult too. Okay. And you've got that primary brain, that really instinctive caveman brain is highly engaged, and you're both going for it. And their voice is going up and your voice is going up, and it's just turning into chaos. So really, when we think about like how we say things to our kids, what we say, really your main aim is to slow down or prevent you and your child going into survival mode, or to bring them out of survival mode more quickly, because actually you're providing this amazingly regulating environment for them. And really the aim is to stay in your secondary brain. Okay, so back to a tiny bit of neuroscience here. Your secondary brain is your thinking brain. All right, and when you're thinking, that's when you can solve problems. That's when you can work through things. And there's a really cool guy out there called Brian Post, and he talks about parenting children with big behaviors and big feelings. And he talks about this kind of ladder, if you like. So some of those behaviors we talked about at the beginning, shouting, hitting, being defiant, being rude, whatever it might be, you know, those are very big behaviors. Okay, you're seeing that survival mode, that primary brain playing out. But then if you start to regulate your child and yourself a bit, then you can move into the kind of the feeling zone. And that might be where, instead of your child chucking a toy at your head, they say, "I hate you," or "get lost," or "leave me alone." So they start to express verbally some of their feelings in a slightly more regulated way. It might not be perfect, it might still get your back up a bit, but they're coming down that behavior ladder until you get to the point where you're back to kind of attitudes. You know, that's the aim, really. And there's an eye roll. They're like, "Oh," you know, or "that's not fair." You know, I think for parents who deal with kids with big feelings and big behaviors, all you want to hear sometimes is, "That's not fair," because that's just attitude playing out, which is still a bit frustrating, but let's face it, not as bad as some of the big stuff. All right. So those core scripts, whatever it was that felt familiar to you, that you say, they're not necessarily wrong, but they might be making you and your stressed out child even more stressed. So I'm just going to go through a couple of ideas now, things that you can literally write down, and I'll send this presentation through to Tam as well, but things you can literally just write down. You can almost put them in your back pocket. That's what I used to do when I was learning to talk in a different way to my kids. So let's start in a really big situation. Okay, so your child is kicking off, and someone said to me once, in an emergency, go to A&E. And that is not accident and emergency. Really, really hope it's not accident and emergency for both you and your child's sake. It is accept and empathize. Okay, so what do we mean by that? What we mean there is accepting how your child is feeling in that moment. It's maybe naming the emotion that they're dealing with. And then you're showing empathy. So you help them to learn to phrase what they're feeling, so that they get better at it in the future themselves, so that they can move from behavior down to feeling in the future. And then you empathize, which shows that you care and you love them. So it might go something like this. Instead of, so they might want another biscuit. And instead of you going, no way you're having another biscuit, it's dinner time in 10 minutes. And they just go crazy. You know, maybe what you don't know is that actually they haven't eaten their packed lunch, or they didn't eat dinner at school because they were really upset about something. So they're starving hungry and they've gone straight into survival mode. And you're shouting and they're shouting. So instead you could say something like this: "Wow, you're so angry right now. And it's all about mummy not letting you have another biscuit. It's okay to feel angry. I mean, I might feel angry if someone said no to my favorite biscuit. I'm here for you. I wonder what we can do to help you right now." Okay. So just think about how, if someone said that to you, how you would feel versus someone saying no, or giving you something that seems very rational and logical to you as the grown-up, but to a child in survival mode, quite frankly, you're talking a different language. Remember, we talked about that primary brain, the survival mode, the stress, the anxiety, and you're talking as like a logical, rational adult. Well, they're going like that. And that's why the temperature's rising in the room. And what you've got to try and do is go like that. Okay, so you're accepting their feelings, you're empathizing with them, And as a result, you're helping them to regulate and you're co-regulating back together again. All right. And that comes on to my second point. So when you need to talk to your child about something they've done wrong, particularly a child who gets stressed or ashamed or feels guilty very easily, what's useful is to think about how you make sure that you stay connected emotionally to your child. Okay, so we talk about connection before correction. And that connection is really, really useful in terms of being able to have conversations with your child who will remember what you're saying. I've just seen a comment, so hang on a second. Oops, no, not that one. Oh, I've gone to the wrong one. Richard, hello Richard. These strategies also help by giving them time to calm down. They'll probably not hear 90% of your words, but the last sentence is crucial. I wonder what. That's what they'll hear. Yeah, Richard, thank you. You're so right. I'm going to come on to that, funnily enough. You preempted my final point. You're so right, though. When you're stressed or angry, really overwhelmed, you don't hear much. So you might literally be talking to a wall, you know. You might be having a really good conversation with yourself. Your rational brain is basically talking to your rational brain. You're not having any impact on your child who's not in their rational brain. So yes, thank you so much. That's a lovely point to make. So another phrase here around connection. Wow, you've got to have been really upset to get so angry that you would hurt your brother like that. I'm here for you and I want to help you. So I wonder what happened to make you so angry. And the really important thing here is when you're correcting or trying to teach a lesson, discipline, whatever word you want to use, to a child who's been very stressed out, your facial expressions, the way you say things is as important as what you say, because your child will be feeling ashamed or guilty, depends. Some children feel guilt, some children feel shame, some children feel both. So really important here to, if you're feeling a bit, oh, I've got to kill my child, go and let it all out. Do some facial exercises, whatever it takes. Do some yawning, stretch that jaw. You know, try not to hands on hips here. You know, all of that stuff that can just bring more stress. So in this one, when you're correcting, really think about the how as much as the what. And finally, back to Richard's point, is that remembering that only 7% of our language impact is through words. And that silence is incredibly powerful. That was me being silent for 10 seconds. And although I can't see all of your faces, when I've done this presentation to large groups in corporates, everybody looks up. It's really interesting. Everybody stops. They might be doing other things. They might be checking their emails, doing other bits of work. Obviously, that happens. And it's amazing how people stop and look. So when you've got a fizzy kid, it is so tempting to want to, or feel like you need to correct or challenge everything that's coming out of their mouth or body. And whilst there may be a time and a place for that, it's important to remember that if they're going through these difficult times, self-esteem is going to be key, and they're going to be losing self-esteem, all right? Because they're doing all this bad stuff. Is it a can't or is it a won't? That's something else to think about. And it's so easy to get into a cycle of negativity about your child. Okay, so really important to remember that walking away from your child's challenging behaviours, as long as they're safe, if they're being really defiant or oppositional, that's okay. You know, if my child now gives me an idiot or stupid, I tend not to respond to that with a correction. I just walk away. I never let it go. A few minutes later, I might say, I find it hard when you call me those words. I'm not feeling great right now. And they'll then come back, usually with an apology without me asking now, because they kind of know what to expect. And it's a genuine apology because I've given them the chance to think about their actions and their words and the impact that's had on someone else. For some children, walking away might be too blunt. For some children who are desperate for emotional connection, you might need to let them know you're walking away, in which case you can say something like this: Daddy's feeling upset by what you just said. So I'm going to go and think about how I'm feeling for a bit while I fold the washing. You're welcome to come and find me if you need me. So just let them know you're going, okay? Go and, I don't know, chew on a stick somewhere quiet. My children have chew toys, actually. They're quite effective for me occasionally, I have to say. It stops me biting through a light switch. No, I'm joking. But you know, it's it gives you time to recover, and it gives them time to recover, and that's really powerful. And also, you're teaching them a great life skill. You know, you kind of want your children to maybe be able to learn to walk away from things sometimes. Okay, I'm conscious of the time, so I'm not going to go through the next page. I kind of put it there anyway, just for some more ideas of switching your core scripts into language that can help support your child who is emotionally dysregulated and stressed or anxious. Okay, so there's a few other ideas there. Again, I'll send the presentation through to Tam. But just to wrap up, and then if anyone's got any quick questions at the end, great. Let us just remember that for whatever reason you came on this call tonight, whatever reason anyone else you know comes on this call, if your kids are fizzy, then they are probably more stressed. And because they're more stressed, they are less emotionally regulated. And because they're less emotionally regulated, they find it harder to express things verbally. And that is why you're seeing those big behaviours. They're in survival mode, and we as their parents need to recognize that, accept that, and maybe just learn to shift what we're seeing from bad behavior to my child is struggling right now. And as soon as you start thinking like that, it makes it easier to change some of those scripts and the language that you're using. And what I found is that just having a couple of those phrases up my sleeve that I started to say regularly changed everything that I was saying to my kids. They didn't need to learn like all of them off by heart. I literally had some of them written on a piece of paper in a back pocket. But relearning the way you talk to your children can really help them to learn to better manage those big feelings and behaviours. And it might take time. There will be an unlearning and a relearning process that you both have to go through. I'll tell you one thing though, I went to bed at night feeling better about myself as a parent. And honestly, even if my children didn't benefit from what I was doing, which I know they have done, that was worth it in itself. Just to go to bed feeling like I'd tried my best, that I'd tried something different because that was what they needed. So thank you guys. It was lovely to have you on tonight. I really appreciate you coming on. Oh, sorry, Richard, thank you. I'm a high school teacher. I do corrections daily. I find that whispering to them is awesome. Oh yeah, I agree. And calming. Kids at school find it really unnerving when I drop the volume. especially when they're trying to wind me up. Richard, that is brilliant. I love that too. Funnily enough, I use something similar. I use a school technique. Sometimes if my kids aren't listening to me and they're just constantly talking together all the time, I stand there completely still and I put my hands up. And after a while, they're like, yes, mum. And I remember the first time I did it, I was like, oh my goodness, what a result. I can't do it, I can't use it all the time. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's brilliant. So I have got lots more stuff. I've got an Instagram account and Facebook, whichever you prefer, but most of my content goes on Instagram, to be honest. Also got a website, fizzykids.co.uk, and a podcast that has loads of ideas and things on it too. So just sign up. Nearly everything is free apart from some of my online courses and book chapters, which basically just go towards covering the cost of the upkeep of my website and things like that. So thank you all so much. It's been lovely. And thank you, Tam, for having me on.